Hey, Janice. Today we're going to talk about how do I sell my deceased parents' home. Kind of a downer, but let's do this.
Important.
So selling any deceased person's home is tricky, and especially when it's your parents, it can be even more complicated. So we'll share some tips about from our experience as probate attorneys and paralegals, and as an executor, how to navigate that situation.
Absolutely. So today we're going to discuss these steps. Who owns the home, going to court, vacating the house, cleaning it out, and how to do only minimal prep.
Right.
Minimal.
And then lastly, I'll talk about how to deal with a very, very common problem, the wannabe flipper. This thing comes up all the time, so make sure you stay to the end so you figure out how to deal with that character.
Absolutely. And don't forget, new books coming out. So sign up at anthonyspark.com/join to get on the list and hear about them first.
Cool. Let's get started. I will first talk about first you got to figure out who owns the house. Just because your parents lived in it up until their passing doesn't mean it was necessarily owned the way you thought it was. Was it owned by them as joint tenants? Was it owned by your mom and dad as tenants by the entirety? That's for the purposes of this conversation, it's essentially the same as joint tenants, meaning whoever died last was the owner, right? But sometimes there's other things. Sometimes your parents put it into a trust. You got to figure that out. Or maybe they put it into an LLC for asset protection purposes. Or maybe they didn't own it at all. Maybe your dad owned it with his with his siblings, your aunts and uncles, as tenants in common. I've seen that before. Also got to make sure, does anyone else have their fangs in the house? Yeah, like a mortgage company. Yeah. Or is there a reverse mortgage? That's becoming more of a thing lately.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody else altogether owned it. I've seen that before, where just almost a random person, a friend, an ex, an uncle, or somebody else owns it and they were just living there. You got to make sure your parents actually owned it or what part of it they owned before you move on to the next steps.
Interesting. So can you check that by pulling the current deed? Is that where you would start? I know.
Sure. That's the best way to pull it. But even then, it'll have words on it like tenants in common or tenants by the entirety that you might not understand completely. So just try to get a consultation from an attorney to walk you through that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you're going to have to go to court to sell it. That's the number two. It's the reality is that you have to get court authority to sell a home if you're the executor. You can't sell it on your own. You have to have a piece of paper that says, I am authorized to do this. And we've talked about this in podcasts before of why that's important. So you don't have a choice. You're going to go to court. And you may need a bond. Maybe you can explain this a little bit more, but you're going to need a bond that says you're going to completely take care of the duties that you're supposed to as the executor with selling the house. In New York, if I'm not mistaken, they will require it, whether there's a will or not. I know we just went through this, that you need the bond to sell the house.
Yeah, the bond is like an insurance policy as your executor, saying that the insurance company guarantees that the executor won't screw up or steal or anything like that.
Right.
And yeah, so... but actually, before we go on, there are some people out there who advocate that you can sell a house without going to court with something called a family tree affidavit. Do not rely on that. Yes, technically, it's a legal fiction that the moment somebody passes away and if there's no will, the house goes directly to the kids, right? If both mom and dad have passed. And that's technically true, but most title companies, that's the gatekeeper that matters. Mm-hmm. They want it to go through court because they don't want to rely on one affidavit for the transfer of this, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property.
Right.
So yeah, don't rely. If you hear from a friend, oh yeah, me and my sister just signed an affidavit and we were able to sell the house. Either you pulled one over on a really terrible title company, or they don't know what they're talking about, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, next step, vacate. So when I say vacate, this is different from cleaning it out, which is next. Vacate means whoever's living there needs to get out.
Yes. Right? Have we ever seen this before?
Only too many times. I don't know.
A lot.
So it doesn't have to. Sometimes there's often the case we have multifamilies, right? Where your parents lived in one unit, but they had tenants in the whatever upstairs or downstairs or whatever. Or maybe maybe it's a sibling. Maybe there's an adult child living there who was living with mom and dad, and now is like, well, now it's my place. No, it's not.
I'm not moving. It is. Right.
Yeah. So you have that issue. Or you had a tenant, like we just talked about. So my number one advice is you got to vacate it before you can sell, your deceased parents' house. If you smell even a hint of a legal problem or resistance, even from a sibling, immediately assume you're going to have a problem.
Yep.
I have never, I'm speaking in absolutes, I have never seen it go from a hint of a problem to no problems. It only goes in the other direction. Hint of a problem to big problems.
I remember you saying this recently when we were talking to another client, and you said, I feel there's going to be a problem. And you knew it. And everyone's like, well. Sure enough, I mean, there was a problem. I mean, you thought so, and what? There was a problem. Like,
remember, I try to be positive about it. I was like, look, I hope that's not the case, but my experience tells me otherwise.
Yeah. Yep.
So what I mean by that is, what I mean by assume there's going to be a problem is that you need to take steps in terms of prepping for a possible eviction, or at least a threatening letter, or looking at cash buyers who will buy a property with an adverse tenant. There's a lot of solutions to that situation, but if you smell the hint of that problem brewing, it's probably brewing.
Yes, and it's probably good if you have a good attorney to help you through this process. Again, we talked about this before. Weigh it out. If it's just this much for an attorney, but this much if you're going to have to, it's a no-brainer.
Cool. So that's vacating people. Jay, can you take over cleaning out?
Let's talk about cleaning out stuff, right? My house alone, I would be just mortified if anyone had to clean it out. Just burn it down at this point, because there's so much. You accumulate that you don't really realize that you have. So you just expect there will be more than you anticipate, right? You think there's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but once you get in there, it's going to be a lot. Usually 2 or 3 days minimum of just labor, depending. I mean, if you're a small condo versus a house, I mean, you could talk days, weeks, a long time just to clean it out. So usually, I mean, we've found it's a little more cost effective to hire a junking company. You know, they come in, you spend a certain amount, they do all the work, they get it all out. One bonus to that is it kind of keeps you from that memory lane. I know personally, you know, when we go through the basement, I get into old pictures and then I sit there and I'm there for a half an hour. I'm there for an hour.
This.
Yeah, like, oh, look, oh my goodness, that's so cute. And then, or you pick something up that really doesn't have a whole lot of value and you're like, oh, I just can't get. If somebody else would have just taken the stuff, moved it over there, it just would have been a lot easier and a lot less time. Also, if you have siblings that are far away when you're cleaning out, whether it's the junkie company, whatever, you can send pictures. I mean, everybody has a smartphone, right? Can you just walk around, you can take pictures, send it, you want it, maybe help you out a little bit, but just expect the cleaning out of the residence is going to take a little longer. It's not a day thing.
Also, what happens if there's a piano, Janice?
No. Pianos are
Sorry,
so
inside
fun.
joke, guys.
Oh, no. Well, it's a good thing to explain is that you think that you're just going to have someone come pick up the piano. You're going to put it on Craigslist. You're going to get rid of. I think we spent months trying to get rid of one piano. And I mean, we tried to donate it. We tried it all, but you and I going over there, picking it up and putting it in the car, which we wouldn't do.
I mean,
but
we were how close to just going there with sledgehammers and destroying the thing, you know?
That's it. We were going to put it in the curb because we tried everything. We tried schools. We tried, you name it, we tried it. So anyway, you have to expect that those things are going to come up.
Which, by the way, soapbox, I mean, we live in a society where there's a perfectly good piano, which if you had to buy it, would have been hundreds of dollars, and we couldn't give it away.
Get it.
I mean, why do we have such a... We need to upcycle in this world more, you know?
Right. If we couldn't... And it was a functioning piano, so it wasn't like we were giving them junk. It worked. It was nice.
It was in tune, I think.
You can't find... Maybe we wouldn't know, right? It sounds good. But anyway, you just expect you might run into those things or you have to be creative.
All right. So the last tip before you get into the bonus is, only engage in minimal prep work. And what I mean by that is do not get into this whole, we need to renovate or upgrade or redo the kitchen or knock down this wall. Don't get into any of that. If you think about it, just do a fresh coat of paint, just get it broom clean and assume that you'll have to price it a bit lower. Because you know what? The amount of money, time, and stress you put in probably won't match the increase in price that you'll get. You'd have to be a very efficient, very experienced contractor or renovator to get the job done in a way that's profitable. And guess what? You're not any of those things.
No.
Own up to it.
Right. You're not. And can I soapbox for one moment, please? Sure. When and if you decide to paint for that next buyer that comes in, could you just do it like a neutral white or something else? I kid you not, we moved into a house where every single wall and edge was peach, and 4 different colors of peach. They're like, oh well, we just painted it. I'm like, it's atrocious. So just nice and neutral, right?
Wait, what if the sellers are listening? Oh, now I feel bad.
Sorry, it was peach. It was terrible. It wasn't this house. It was like houses and houses ago.
Okay.
Maybe peach was cool at that point, but it was like 40 shades of peach everywhere. But anyway, right? A nice neutral. If you're going to do it, just do it right. Off my soapbox now. Okay, so how do we deal with the HGTV wannabe flipper that everyone is turning into? I know, right?
So every family, there's one family member who watches too much HGTV or whatever the channel is and thinks that they want to flip that house. Like they see this as their opportunity. They've been reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. They've been reading and they're like, oh, if only I had money, if only I had an opportunity, I could flip a house and make pocket a cool, I don't know what they're thinking, whatever.
Yeah, millions, right?
95% of the time, 98% of the time, they have no idea what they're doing. They don't have a down payment. They can't get a mortgage. This is just not going to happen. But it's a member of the family. It's somebody who you have to deal with. So it might even be your brother, your sister, somebody really close to you. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with this person who has unrealistic dreams regarding something that's everyone is tied to financially and emotionally? It's the parents' house. Right. How do you deal with it? Okay. So if you sense this situation brewing, number one, you got to be patient. You need to let the wannabe figure out on his own. It's usually a he that it's not doable. You can't force that down their throat because they'll never get it. Exactly. They have to come to the realization on their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The way you can help them come to that realization on their own is you set firm expectations about the estate. Meaning, if the wannabe usually wants to get a deal, get a sub-market price on the house. Basically, taking money out of his sibling's pocket. But anyway, aside from that, just make it clear. This house is selling for fair market value. It can be to you or it can be to somebody else, but whatever happens, it's going for fair market value, right?
Yep.
And then get plan A. Yeah, you have to. The court won't approve a sale otherwise.
Yeah.
And then get plan A rolling, meaning let your wannabe brother or sister, do what he needs to do, but in the meantime, get plan A rolling. Hire or do the clean out, vacate, everything we talked about. Get it ready for sale.
Yep.
Yeah, hire a broker, list it. Start showing it even. And all this time, the wannabe knows anytime he wants to step in and make his fair market offer, we're happy to entertain it, right? And then if he can, within that margin, make his flip that house profit, more power to you. We're cheering for you, but we're not. We're not going to hold up the estate for you, and we're not going to cut into our shares to let you live out this dream. Right? Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. Because you have to think of the estate as a whole. I mean, it's really great they want to try it, but it's not the right time to try it when it's just not the right time. Right. Absolutely.
So I feel like this approach of being patient and not trying to force, like just giving them enough rope to figure out that they can't do it, just that's the best way to keep the family relationship positive. I mean, if they get upset that you won't give them a severe discount on the house, then there's not much you can do about that. That's just somebody else needs to talk sense into that person.
Right. You just can't do that. I mean, you can't.
But if you've given them every opportunity within the framework of how an estate should run, like yes, by all means, look, it's listed at this price. If you can come in at that price.
Absolutely.
We're happy for you to do your deal. Just give them that, and that's the best way to keep the family together and not screw everyone over. Excuse my language.
Absolutely. No, but it's true. And then you say, absolutely, just bring all your documents to the table. Let's figure it out. And right, it's great that you want to do all this, but if you don't have the piece of paper saying you have the money, right?
Yeah. Treat it like a transaction. Proof of funds, your pre-approval letter. Just do everything you would if it was a third party. Don't take advantage of your siblings, please.
Absolutely. And if you are the DIYer that's listening, get your ducks in a row if you're ready to do this. You can have all your paperwork. Absolutely. But no, it's got to be the fair market and you have to have all your documents. So anyway, I think that's it. Great topic about how to sell your deceased parents' home. It's an important topic because it happens, unfortunately. And don't forget to get on the list for new books coming out, anthonyspark.com/join, so you can hear about them first.
Cool. Thank you, Janice. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Talk soon.